at a conference, I think it was in Houston. Y'all, yeah, yeah. And a lot of y'all probably remember me as the little one kind of wandering around saying, I want to start an assisted living. I want to start an assisted living. And so I was following y'all around and happened to be in that conference. And I had an aha moment when the Board of Nursing and the state of Texas came together and said, we understand that your residents are living longer and they have more high acuity needs. And so what we want to do now is widen that delegation. And I said, I can provide creative solutions for complex care. And so I've taken that medication delegation model that I saw when I first came into this industry. We've expanded that. What we do is we offer your caregivers a 4-hour training course followed by a competency exam. We do med cart setups in your community to make sure orders match medications on hand, trainings match what we are giving our residents, and everything comes together. So should state actually send someone in that's knowledgeable on what medication administration should look like, we have all our ducks in order. In addition to that, we've expanded to allow you to have what's called high acuity residents. So residents that may have Foley catheters, colostomies, require insulin administration. We do hands-on training with not only the owners and managers, but also your caregivers. We do return demonstrations, and then we also give them certificates of completion. Now, to make sure that our nursing license and our credentials are protected, we come out and continuously monitor your clients' charts to make sure they remain what state called stable and predictable, which means basically they qualify for delegation. Okay. The other thing that we do in your communities is compliance consulting. And so Ashley is the queen of compliance, and she is my go-to for compliance. And I come on in from a clinical perspective. So we want to make sure that your clinical policies match what you're actually doing. So some of the things that I see commonly when I walk into communities is this TB test requirement. We have in our policies and procedures that we're going to test our residents on move-in, and we have in our resident files that we did a screening or nothing at all on move-in. COVID, we're requiring everybody to turn in COVID vaccine records, but nowhere in our policies and procedures are we mentioning that we're requiring COVID vaccination cards on move-in. And so we kind of thumb through your policies and procedures, your infection control, make sure that you're doing what you say you're going to do for infection control. I go in a lot and look at policies and procedures, and they say that a nurse will do this, and there is no nurse on site anywhere ever. So it's just little things like that. A lot of us have been smart enough to buy templates or to incorporate what was already in place. Well, we want to make sure that what's in place actually matches what you're doing and it's appropriate for your assisted living care home. We also do clinical risk analysis. Again, coming in, looking at your residents, looking at your staff. Does your staff competencies and what's documented as staff competency match your resident care needs? Do you have brand new caregivers that you're having do the highest skills possible? Well, how do we really explain that to state? Biggest answer is we don't until something happens. And so we're there for you and to be ready when something happens, as it most times will. Other hangups that other contradictions that we see when we walk into the communities are our medications. And so state has kind of dictated what needs to be on what's called the medication administration record. The name of the medication, the strength, the dose, the amount, and the directions. The route of administration, prescription numbers. There's a list of items that state requires us to be documenting when we're bringing those medications into the community, as well as when we are administering our medications. I see a lot of times in the community where we have a MAR in place that lists every single medication, and our caregivers are signing off on that MAR, but they're administering from a pill planner. Bad news, okay? We have no way of knowing what's in that pill planner. And so we come in and say, well, this is the correct way to do it, which is simply saying administer meds from pill planner versus signing off on a task when you are actually doing detailed medication administration. So in a nutshell, we come in, we review all of your clinical components. We work side by side with you. The best thing about what we do is we enable our clients to be able to say, we have a registered nurse. We do have registered nurses and LVNs on call and available to your community 24 hours a day. So that is iNurse Delegate in a nutshell. We do free 15-minute consultations. I've got some flyers up here. I've got some business cards up here. I encourage each of you to reach out, do a 15-minute consultation so we can kind of see what your community needs are, where we can implement our services to better support you from a clinical perspective, giving your staff more confidence, giving your business more structure, and giving your residents a better quality of life is pretty much our goal when we partner with you. Now, Torch, if you promise to be kind, I'll open up for questions.
Okay, so I have a question.
Okay.
For facilities who have been operating from higher standards, where would you suggest they start?
Can you repeat this question?
Okay. Where would you suggest that they start in overhauling their clinical compliance measures? Like, what would be the first thing that you would suggest they do?
So the very first thing I would suggest is always a consultation, because there is no cookie cutter I have not seen two communities alike since I started this company. So I would say start with a consultation. Once we go through your consultation and detail your needs, we have an onboarding schedule, and it's a day one onboarding, which is when we come through and we kind of fine tune through your policies and procedures. We go through all your staff files. We go through all of your clinical files. It's about a 3 to 6 day onboarding process. And that's where we're coming in, identifying everything that's out of place that needs to be updated and implementing new policies, procedures, and practices. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. In terms of infection control, with COVID being what it is, and with changes that have occurred several times over the last 2 years, what measures would you say people need to be taking right now? Like even from greeting guests at the door to what they should be doing within the facility?
Good question. So what we've seen state be the happiest with is for our caregivers to meet our visitors at the door, where that sheet is, where we've got the no's that have to be actual ends and not lines drawn down. Our caregivers are greeting our visitors. Our caregivers actually taking the temperature. Our caregivers are sanitizing their hands, wiping down that equipment. We still want new and used pen holders. That is what we've seen state be most happiest with. Now, there have been some new updates coming out saying state can no longer require you to require masks, and we can no longer. The truth is I'm sure you all have experienced, it really depends on who visits your facility, whether or not, and so when we implement policies and procedures, we go with the most restrictive. And so when I go and visit my communities, if I don't have a staff member that comes up, they normally get audited. I'm sorry, masks, I still encourage you to require masks. I actually have a small care home over in Denton, and one of my family members contacted me and said, do we still have to wear masks because we're 100% vaccinated for our residents? That family's 100% vaccinated. I think that most of the spouses are 100% vaccinated. But what about all the other visitors that come in? And so we're putting ourselves in a position where, we can ask if they're vaccinated, but we cannot ask to see their vaccination card. And so I encourage you all to keep your mask provisions in place. Because how do you explain to a family member that their loved one contracted COVID under your care?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Leanne.
Oh, so Pat, is you or your staff, are you available to do in-services?
Oh,
that are more-
absolutely.
So we can contract with you to come in and do those? Oh, good.
Absolutely. We love doing in-services, and we have a wide variety of in-services that we offer.
Wonderful. Time saver.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Can you talk a little on medication disposal?
Yes.
Pharmacy medication disposal.
Absolutely. So in assisted living communities, our staff members should not be disposing of medications. We do have some communities that still choose to have the certified med aides. Under my delegation, we kind of try to rid ourselves of certified med aides. They are allowed to dispose, however. Regular caregivers should not dispose. What I recommend is contracting with your pharmacy on a pickup date. Most of our communities have either hospice or home health in place. They're able to dispose, and then our clients are able to call us in for disposal. So when we do those med card audits, we will also do witness disposals. Does that answer your question?
Can you talk a little about hospice? I've heard lately that maybe hospice is rearing away from disposing from medications, or what is that about?
So it's kind of one of those things where if you don't know, I won't tell you. Medicare no longer requires hospice to dispose of medications. That does not mean that hospice nurses should not dispose of medications. I am a hospice nurse by trade, and I have not been with a company yet that told us we could not. However, when I get a call at 4 a.m., someone is expired and they are in a community, do I want to count 50 Xanax? And no. And so if the community doesn't ask, then normally they will gear away from disposing.
Is that true? Is that true that another hospice told me that they can give the family member the medication?
What's the question?
She asked, is it true? She said a hospice told her that they can give a family member the medication. It depends on the medication. Narcotics, no. And narcotics are the big one that hospices don't want to dispose of. So narcotics, they cannot release to the family. Other medications are okay.
Well, she said it was Medicare requirement.
If
the family wants to give it to them.
Yeah, Medicare is okay with them, but not the narcotics. Yeah, narcotics have to be disposed of.
So I actually had a recent patient that passed, and their hospice agency said that it is now their property, including all narcotics, and so they wouldn't dispose of it, and that belongs to the family now because it's there.
Yeah,
I've
that's
heard
what they
that
were
also.
saying.
So
It says, I
That
had that.
it belongs to the family now, that medication. So we
Yeah.
can clarify.
Yeah, so when you get to narcotics are controlled, and so they should stay in the custody of the care home or be destroyed there on site. I will say that that hospice nurses have been trained that they can release medications to the family. It's never been a narcotic that can be released to the family. Now, from a hospice perspective, hospice agencies, like all of us, we go for quality, right? There have been times when family members have said, I want to take my loved one's medications. Some nurses make a decision to release it. You should not be releasing controlled substances to family members. That's illegal. Yeah, it's a federal, yeah. Exactly. What are you gonna do with them? Mm-hmm. Yep. Sounds like we need some intervention. Yeah.
So nothing changed with the Medicare about that, like last year.
Well, so what it is Medicare used to require hospice. Medicare kind of teetered, actually. At one point, they required hospice nurses to dispose of the narcotics. At another point, they prohibited them from disposing of them. Now, although it's not required, it also isn't prohibited. It becomes part of the hospice policy. Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain health maintenance activities, what those are, and what the new regulations in place for that?
Absolutely. So health maintenance activities, HMAs, it's similar to delegation. It requires a nursing assessment. You're kind of saying that if it weren't for this resident's functional disabilities, they would be able to perform the task independently. And so they are able to direct their care. They're able to direct that caregiver on how to perform maybe the Foley catheter care. A nurse has to come in and assess the residents ability to direct that care, you can also implement a HMA under a family member's direction. We don't do HMA simply because my thoughts are if a family member or a resident were able to direct their own care and it requires that that family member be readily available, they probably wouldn't be in our assisted living communities.
Is that what you was asking me about? You got the answer? You got it?
And I think HMAs are pretty much everything except insulin right now. Insulin cannot be done as an HMA.
What about the
Yeah, this is a good time to ask questions
Yes.
and talk about things that's going on at our facilities. I mean, we all deal with the same thing, but this is a good time to talk about the things that we deal with.
So one of the things that I want to talk about is skincare.
Skincare, yes.
Skincare facilities and skin maintenance.
Yes.
Skin sheets. So could you talk about that from the nursing perspective?
Absolutely. Okay. So we know that state frowns upon wounds, first off. Family members frown upon wounds. Good care is expected to prevent skin injuries and wounds, right? What we're finding in a lot of communities is our caregivers or our communities are depending on outside agencies that come in and do showers and baths. And so our staff is never visually assessing the skin. We've had, I think, two incidents where a wound has been festering and no one in the community was aware of that wound. And so what we require and what I advise you all is to implement strategies and frequencies. And so our frequency is monthly. We need to do a nurse needs to review a skincare sheet every week. Your caregiver should be turning in skincare reports, just saying that we visually inspected. Because guess what? When that wound popped up, that first one popped up, and it was in a place that the caregivers had to see whether they were showering or not, everybody said, I never saw that. I didn't see that. The hospice based her. And so I encourage all of my communities, put everything in writing, be as detailed as you can in writing. And so that when the question pops up, we're not trying to remember and we're not scrambling.
Something that a lot of facilities don't talk about, and I think it's because they don't necessarily understand, but we over-medicating gradual dose reduction and really looking at meds in comparison to what is going on with the resident. So can you speak from that perspective?
Absolutely. Thank you. So one of the biggest things that I see are PRN medications as needed medications. And it tickles me pink when I see PRN medications and your needs assessment says, is resident able to make their needs known? No. Dementia, Alzheimer's, nonverbal. And so either a need is not being met. We have someone that's in bed in pain, but they're not getting pain medication because caregivers should not be assessing to know when a pain medication is due. Or B, we have someone that's over-medicated because the caregivers are allowed to give PRN. Exactly. And they want them to be quiet and stay in bed and let them watch TV. Either way, we're out of compliance. PRN should be given under one of three circumstances, either, and this is an iNurse delegate policy, either A, the resident is able to verbalize the need for that medication. B, there is a measurable or observable symptom in place. And so in training, we talk about Tylenol PRN for fever. Who can tell me what a fever is? Anybody?
Warm skin.
Temperature higher
Extremely
than
warm.
100.
Temperature higher than 100, skin warm. Anybody else? Above 101, shortness of breath. Another one. So we all have different perspectives of what a fever is, right? We cannot depend on our caregivers then to know what a fever is. So we would have to have a measurable or observable symptom, temperature greater than 101. Tylenol PRN for temperature greater than 101. That's the second option to give a PRN. The third one is that a nurse or clinician instructs our caregiver to give a PRN medication. Okay, so nausea. We talk in training, I get 1,000 different descriptions of what nausea is. So we shouldn't be giving PRN medications for nausea unless we have a resident that says I'm nauseous. We could give a PRN medication for vomiting because we can see vomiting. Does that make sense? Other thing with PRN medications is we should have a follow-up visit to that room. So if a caregiver calls and says, Ms. Smith, something's not right with her, the nurse is on the phone, the nurse says, well, let's go ahead and give her let's go ahead and give her some tramadol. Within an hour, someone should go back into that room and report to that nurse what we see so that that nurse can say, is the headache better? Whatever we're treating, has it resolved? Or do we need to do something else? There's never a time where we should be documenting that a PRN was given and everything just kind of floats away from that point.
Speak on narcotics, how they should be treated. Definitely the fact that a lot of facilities don't do narcotic counts. Just how we should be handling that from not only a nursing perspective, but legally.
So one of the things I come across is because we do like to make good friends with hospice companies because they're great referral sources in some instances, we kind of bend to their needs, and they have a greater liability insurance plans in place than we do. And so for narcotics, one of the things I've seen is we're allowing the hospice nurses to come in and change what the bubble pack says, okay? So maybe the Norco was ordered 1 tab every 6 hours, and the doctor changed the order to 2 tabs every 6 orders. Hospice nurse comes in, scratches out that 1, puts 2, because they don't want to order a whole new package of Norco. It's a federal offense. Narcotic counts should be done not only at shift change, but every time a narcotic is pulled from that container, that count should be redone. Locking of narcotics. Everybody has been pretty universal about having the narcotics. Honestly, I'm seeing a lot of comfort kits just stuffed in the refrigerator, which is troubling in itself. We'll talk about that in a second.
That's good.
But that refrigerator still needs to be behind another locked unit. So narcotics have to be behind double locks. Okay, so what I love to see is the med cart that has a lock, and then a locked box inside the med cart where our narcotics are kept. Or a refrigerator in a locked closet, a refrigerator with a lock on it inside of a locked closet. That's what I prefer to see. However you choose to do it, it should definitely be behind a double lock. Narcotics should definitely be counted. We should not be wasting. And the state requires that we have a controlled substance diversion policy in place. How do we handle and identify diversion of controlled substances? The comfort kit in the refrigerator, it is specifically stated in the regs that suppositories should not be stored with oral medications. We'll leave that right there.
What if they're in a Ziploc bag and
We don't open it.
2 different Ziploc bags?
So theoretically, the Ziploc bag should be in separate areas of the refrigerator. Now, realistically, most of those oral medications they shouldn't be in the refrigerator at all. A lot of times we're keeping that box closed because hospice wants to get it out earlier than the resident needs it. And once they get it out, we need to be counting it if it's opened. And so to prevent from having to do NARC counts on medications we're not using, we're just shoving a closed box in a refrigerator. But the majority of medications in that box shouldn't be refrigerated. Oh, and the morphine, the liquid lorazepam. I've never seen a bottle of morphine or liquid lorazepam properly measured out in the bottle that it comes into the community. It's always more, right? Which leaves a lot of room for diversion. I-nurse delegate requirement suggestion to all of you, and the hospice agencies are able to do it. The pharmacy will pre-draw those syringes of morphine. If they pre-draw them, they need to be labeled. I have an excellent nurse that I work with that actually prints out the labels and puts them on each individual syringe. The communities that I've been to that does have the individual syringes drawn, there is no name, or you don't know what's in that syringe, how much is in there. That's just as bad as having an unlabeled pill bottle in your community.
I know I've been,
I appreciate you.
but it's because I see these things. Can we talk about the bane of our existence, which is the medication med minder boxes, and why they are not the best route to go? And if you are using that, who should be filling those? Because it should not be just any staff person.
Correct. So the pill minder boxes, I see a lot of, and I understand the theory behind them. What I encourage you all to do is kind of think a little differently. Think outside of convenience, especially when we're dealing with human lives. All right. So, for instance, just yesterday we ran into a parameter order, and a lot of your residents have blood pressure parameter orders. All right. So,
What's a parameter order?
so something like metoprolol, 25 milligrams, hold if blood pressure is below 110/50. We need to be documenting blood pressures because that's an order to check your blood pressure before giving the medicine. But B, who's to go into this pill minder box and search for metoprolol? Who knows? How can we hold metoprolol if it's in a pill minder? That's A. So when we have pill minders in place, we should have pill minder guides. Pill minder guides are a PIA. You're going to list those medications with little pictures of what they might look like and what the contraindications, side effects, and what they're doing. Why? Because if state says, what are you giving this pill for? Our caregivers need to be able to tell them. They're not going to memorize them. I'm a nurse. I don't know what half of them are and what they look like. But at least they can say, let me get that for you, and go to their pill minder guide, right?
What's a PIA?
I'm not going to say that out loud. I'm a Christian. It's a pain in the pain in the
Oh.
Yeah, PIB, PIB. Filling of those pill minder boxes. And so our caregivers under no circumstances should be filling those pill minder boxes. That either requires delegation or a degree, so or certificate. So you could be a certified med aide filling that pill minder box. A nurse can fill that pill minder box. Our caregivers should not be filling that pill minder box unless they're under delegation of an RN. Another point, I've seen a lot of medication delegation with an LVN signature. That's not a thing. That's not possible. LVNs cannot delegate. LVNs can supervise. They cannot delegate. LVNs cannot do initial assessments. A lot of us are blessed to be able to afford an LVN or have a good connection with an LVN in the community. If they are using their credentials behind their signature, it should not be on an initial assessment. They cannot do comprehensive assessments.
I have to say, I was in business over 20 years. Now, I've never actually had a problem with giving a medication plan. So I'm pretty sure a lot of people in this room probably can say the same thing. So is it a certain place that we can see where that's written? That we are not, that anybody can't fill the planners? Because I've always filled my planners and I'm not a nurse or.
If you send that to me, I'll pull up the reg and send it to you.
I mean,
were you under delegation?
Huh?
Were you under delegation?
Never have been. All my years, I've never been under delegation.
And I'll be honest with you, I have a community, it's not the same topic, but I have a community whose policies and procedures said that an RN was going to do all sorts of things, and RN is not anywhere involved. And it's not if, it's just a when. It's one of those things that it's not trouble until it is. And so a lot of times surveyors come in and they don't find through, but it's just who you're going to get and who's going to pay attention to what. But I will send that to you from the red book.
Yeah, I mean, I would think a lot of people here can probably say they actually, you know, if you have a small facility, you're filling the planners, but not under nurse delegation. If we really would say, you know what I'm saying? A lot of people.
Yeah, those Plano homes we just took over, all of them
that's
were
in
being
writing.
filled. Yeah,
Really,
I'll send it to you.
For the facilities, not as a nurse rule, but
Sure.
for the assisted living facility.
Yeah, I'll send it to you, and if you want to share it with the team, absolutely. But send me a reminder, because I've got monkey brain.
Just to that same topic, my take on the regs, and of course we're about to get the third rendition of HMA and the delegation process. I've never seen it say this is not allowable. It gives you sort of a minor set of examples of what are allowable with that. Is that the part of the regs that you were speaking to?
I am, and I hate trying to remember stuff because I have monkey brain. I'm tempted, if I was to use my visual, my photographic memory, I'm tempted to say it says something like must. So, you know, in the regs, we look for must or can or may. I want to say, yeah, I think I saw a must.
What it's saying is must with a certain, it just does not, the regs do not address the items that are not listed. And
Exactly.
that's where everybody gets in
Get
trouble. So
exactly.
the third rendition is due.
Oh, yeah.
And so we'll see what that says, but they never, so it's easy to fall in the trap because it's not on there saying don't do that.
Absolutely. And I think that, whenever we work with our clients, what we look at is also liability. And so if I know for me, I do fill planners. I am a nurse, if I didn't say that. It's frustrating. It's, I actually,
Everybody can't do it.
yeah, I actually took over filling a planner because a nurse's father was in my community and she was jacking it up every week. And so I will say to you, I do remember seeing must in the regs. I'm going to send that to you. But even outside of that, what's the best thing to do for your residents?
So PAC regulation, PAC rule 553.261, medications. Administration medications must be administered according to physician's orders. Residents who choose not to or cannot self-administer the medication must have their medication administered by a person who holds a current license under the state law, holds a current medication aid permit, acts under the authority of a person who is a current nurse license, functions under the direct supervision of a licensed nurse. Okay?
But that's administering though, that's not assisting.
Right. But most of us are administering medication because the residents do not know. That is how you get caught up from a survey perspective. If you were supervising medication with a resident who doesn't know the difference between their meds, don't know what medicine they're getting, you are essentially administering meds. And unless you're sitting down with that person and going over that med minder and telling, and they're sitting with you hand over hand to fill that med minder, you shouldn't be doing that. As a former surveyor, I cited facilities for that. It doesn't mean that every surveyor will, but I'm telling you, I have.
Shoot.
So what you call administration versus what is actually administration versus supervision, that's where you get in trouble. Okay? So she's right. Most of us are administering meds, and we're saying we're supervising, but we're really administering because those residents don't know. Okay?
Ashley, are you able to pull up 225? I think it might be in the BON 225.11. I think it is. I think that may address it as well. So far as placing meds in those pill planners. On the delegation form, it talks about the requirements. I think it's form 8585. It talks about the requirements that must be in place if you're administering from a pill planner. So believe it or not, requirements when administering from a pill planner actually are more stringent than those if you're administering from pill bottles. Because it's unlabeled. Because it's unlabeled, it's unidentifiable.
So, all your caregivers should be under RN delegation, right?
Yeah.
So part of that RN delegation should be education on how to do medication administration, and that should all be documented. So if they do have that documentation, the caregiver has been delegated to do that. Is there still an issue between that caregiver taking out of the pill box and assisting? Because almost all of our residents have dementia, so we are administering for them.
Yeah.
So any other documentation other than the RN delegation that says they have been educated, they know how to do this.
Absolutely.
Anything additional to that?
If they're administering from a pill minder, this is another one of those things that is not in the TAC. It is, I think it's an HCS delegation requirement because it's under the state bubble. We train this way that you need to have a pill minder guide in place because what's expected is that that person that's administering be able to identify what they're giving. And so in order now, can we count on the caregivers to memorize? And we could say that we are, but I suggest having something handy that they can reference and say, okay, yeah, this is for this, that is for, and making sure you don't have parameters in place, which most like blood pressure pill, not most, some blood pressure pills and such might have parameters in place.
Catherine was asking, will the bubble pack eliminate a lot of this?
I love bubble packs. I love bubble packs. So bubble packs. Wait, when you talk about bubble packs, are you talking about the one where the whole dose, all the pills in one
definitely
dose?
love that one.
Love that one. And if you look at that one, it identifies what's in there. You know the color, the shape, everything. That's how meds should be passed from a pill planner.
Now, is that assisting or is that administering if you're doing it from a bubble pack?
That comes down to your resident. So if you put it in a cup and sit it there, and your resident's able to take it, you assist it.
Yeah,
If your resident
no
is-
difference to put it in there.
Yeah.
But she's saying if they don't,
Know what it
Know what
is,
it
if you're
is.
administering.
so we just want to, it's just a good conversation.
So administration and assistant. If you haven't noticed, I've tried to kind of swerve around this. Y'all did this last month. Y'all did this last month. All right. Okay. So assisting goes into self-administration, right? You're getting into self-administration because you're just giving those pills, and that resident should be able to tell you what they're taking and why.
And they can't, then that's administration.
Then you're administering. Because then that responsibility shifts to your caregiver. Should be able to tell you what they're giving and why. Not memorize, but be able to have that reference available.
That's your final answer.
That's my final answer. Please. I think when I remember being a chap following y'all around and this assisting, Janoyce, this assisting and administration conversation, the tag is so blurred. And so again, then we come in from a liability perspective. How can we protect ourselves best? What's the most restrictive and safest way to operate?
Mhm.
You want me to read it?
225.11.
Yes, so the 225.11 is the delegation of administration of medication from the pill reminder container. It says, in addition to all previous criteria listed, when delegating the administration of oral unit dose medication from the client's daily pill reminder container, RN must ensure that the unit dose medications are placed in the client's daily pill reminder container from properly dispensed prescription bottles by the RN or a person mutually agreed upon by the RN and the client or the client's responsible adult who has demonstrated the ability to complete the task properly. Instruct the client or client's responsible adult and the unlicensed person involved in such delegation activity about each medication placed in such container with regard to distinguishing characteristics of each medication, proper time, dose, route, and adverse effects, which may be associated with the medication. Provide to the client responsible adult if applicable, and the unlicensed person's instructions to contact the RN before the medication is administered when there are questions concerning the medication or changes to the client's status related to the medication being given. An example is when medications appear to be rearranged or missing. Make supervisory visits in the event there are changes in the client's status related to medications being given, and determine the frequency of supervisory visits in consultation with the client or the client's responsible adult to ensure that safe and effective services are being provided. And then also ensure the client or client's responsible adult acknowledges in writing that the administration of medications under the section will be delegated to an unlicensed person.
So now let's talk about that. So 225.11 is a Board of Nursing code, okay? And the reason why I implement this into delegation, we have caregivers that have received nursing delegation. The nurse walks in there, they talk 15 minutes to your caregivers, might look at a medication list. They sign up on this form, and we're lucky if we see them once a year, if ever. I've walked into communities where it's dated like 2015. It's like, seriously? She's never come back? Here's the problem. When something goes wrong with those medications, your resident's loved one can choose who to sue. Are they going to sue you, the big facility owner, the community owner, or are they going to chase behind this nurse? Because technically, regardless, this nurse's license is probably at fault. Yeah, you can go ahead and put something against her license, but your liability is exposed because you're outside of best practices. And so what the TAC is kind of blurry on, if you bring in other sources and guidance, it fills those voids. And so whenever Ashley taught me that whenever I'm trying to figure out the best route, I start bringing in all those sub notes, the fine print. And that it covers you as an operator. Because technically, if you're not, if like we require that every family, all of my communities, when they send out their resident agreement, move-in forms, a CRA signature form is a part of it. Technically, your caregivers are not under true delegation. No one has scratched it yet. And no one scratches things until it benefits them.